Okay. So, all the stuff that has to happen, right? We got to have some sort of motor plate to mount this in that neighborhood. And we have to have clearance for this guy here, because it's going to be an intermediate shaft. We got to put a clutch on the motor. And basically how this is going to work is, okay, so pretend this is all in the correct orientation, right? You're going to have your clutch on your motor here, right? And that's going to run from this little sprocket up to this big sprocket here. And this one, let me see if I can get a tooth count on it. That's a 36 tooth here, and that's like a 13, so you're about 3 to 1 on that. And then I'm going to put another 13 here and something like a 70 here. So in total, we're going to be something like 18 to 1, something like that. The idea being is that we're going to run a, I think these are number 35 or 40 chain, and that's going to run down to a number 40 chain sprocket here.
So you would very rightly ask yourself a couple of questions. Why? Why bother? Why this? And what are you hoping to get out of it? And the answers are, I had a hunch that having a nice mid-motor powered bike would be kind of fun. It's sort of kind of like, you know, building your way through the history of motorcycling starting way back at the beginning. And that's kind of sort of true, but it's also kind of definitely not. I'll explain more here in a second, but for now, I'm just going to show you how I figured that this will work in a vertical orientation. Because I've seen a bunch of people build with Predators, but I've not seen them really explain this. And so, if we look at it here, you have ball bearings supporting the crankshaft, and then you have journal bearings everywhere else. But what you don't have is an oil pump, so it's not necessarily limited in its orientation. As long as it can get splash lubrication up into the weep holes for the cam bearings, you should be fine. Which I think it will in this orientation, but I'm not going to be running it for super long, so, you know, even if it blows up, whatever, it's a $120 engine, like, it's not that critical. But just bear in mind that I did look at it, I did think about it, and hopefully it'll actually pan out. But so far, with testing and all that stuff, it hasn't given me any indications that it's anything other than fat and happy. So there's that, and now let's get back onto the actual build here. So again, the why bother and what are you hoping to get out of it part, I am hoping to test a hunch that having multiple gears behind an engine is better than having a single speed. The problem I find here is that, well, the motor I picked was too big. You know, if you're going to do this playing the at-home game, like you want to make a motorized bicycle that sucks less and all that stuff, don't go with a Predator 212. It's too big. It's really in the way, and knowing what I know now, I really would have gone with something like the Predator 79cc. They're like 2 or 3 horsepower, and they fit a lot better in a lot of places. This one is so big and also got so much power that as soon as you turn it on, I mean, like as soon as you are above idle and the clutch is engaged, it's putting out 3 or 4 times more power than a human being can. So it just takes over, and pedaling becomes kind of useless. So there's no assist. The other part that you need to be aware of is that even if you use one of those little like 79, 80cc Predators or the 2-stroke bicycle kit or whatever else you pick, even electric, as soon as you start to take steps towards motorizing a bicycle, you make it infinitely worse as a bicycle. That should be known.
I got kind of lucky. I have 2 of these hubs, and it bolts right in, which is pretty cool. And the brakes will even fit on this wheel, even though the other one was a 29. This is a 28. That doesn't really matter all that much. And I mean, brakes are kind of not that important. So, anyways, we got this wheel, and this is not a single speed. This is actually, I think it's an 8-speed. It's a Shimano, and it is an internally geared hub. So that's the important part that I want. And now I've got this extra wide crankset here. Got this extra wide crankset that'll clear the engine. And in here is where I'm going to end up mounting this intermediate shaft, right? So what we got to do is we got to figure out a way to go from this, right, down to here. Now, this is the sprocket that actually came with this set, and it's probably not going to show up on camera at all, but there is a flat in here. Okay, so, sorry. All right, so the way this thing normally works, or is supposed to in theory, right? Slap this on, and it doesn't really matter which direction it goes on. There's a little flat here on the shaft itself, and then you're supposed to be able to shove a bolt through it. Now, which size bolt to what direction doesn't matter. Point is, bolt goes through. This is where this goes, right? Well, this doesn't have a spread clutch on it. That's gonna present a problem. This one does present, well, it's got spread clutch, but it's meant to be threaded. So we got to make ourselves something that goes between a style like this and a style like this. So that's going to be the next trick. Alright, so we did a little bit of messing around at my buddy's place. I got this little biscuit made here. As you can see, it's just hollow, so it's going to slide over the shaft. It's got a little threaded hole there for a key stop there. And then I'm going to slide it into the inside of this, and we're going to drill a hole through here, and then we're going to weld this whole little donut up, so that way we can thread it in, thread it out, slide it on and off the shaft, and it'll all be nice and solid and cohesive. And if this doesn't work, I'll go back and try and turn out a one-piece version of this. But I figured, since this came in my little kit of Chinesium, what the hell, might as well use it. And also, I'm lazy, so this seemed easier. Okay, a little bit of diddling around with the welder, and she's now one piece with the set screw right in there. Let's take it off. And some of you may be already a little concerned that, like, it's a 5/16 set screw. Like, that's not really going to be enough for 6.5, 7 horsepower, whatever this thing's going to end up making. But really all this is doing is transmitting the power of your pedal stroke when you're making them. And since this is a prototype, I think that'll be okay. Most of the power transmission is going to be on the outside of the spread clutch, so I'm not too worried about that. Of course, I could be wrong. We'll find out. Right, so I had previously thought about welding this whole thing just solid, but it turns out there are some things that are a disadvantage to just really stuffing it together when you're doing, well, anything, but especially prototyping, and that is, I didn't realize I put the bearings on inside out. See, with these little guys, if you want them to roll, the race has to go against the shaft, and then the bearing balls go against that cap. Then it rolls so much nicer, as in at all. So now, when we put it all together, it'll be in there nice and snug, as opposed to not that. Right, so we got this sprocket. It's normally for a mini bike. It's a number 35 chain. And we got this double sprocket here. It's normally for like an e-bike with whatever number bicycle chain is. So, deal is, you got the actual spread clutch doing the business. That's right there. And then you got these clamp rings here. That is a different bolt pattern than this by a lot. So I'm going to fill in these little holes here, and then I'm going to chuck it up on the lathe, spin it out, and make this sprocket go right there. It's gonna be the outer sprocket there. Whee! Right, so ta-da! It's back. It's ready. It's sprockety. Yeah, no guard here anymore because the plastic guard it had was like that big, you know, not big enough. But yeah, you'd be able to pedal, and then it'll freewheel. And yeah. Right, so we got our little half shaft housing in place, but now it needs bearings. And after a little bit of very careful measurement and planning, I found out you probably just smack them in. I don't need to make any cuts, so I'm going to do that. Like so. Make sure you pound on the outer race only.
So now you get to hear me ramble on more and more about how I actually knocked this thing together, what parts I used, and all that good stuff. And the extra wide crankset I got off of Amazon, and I think it was like 40 bucks or something like that. And it came with it came with cranks, but it didn't come with pedals. So that's one thing. Then I got the actual Sprague clutch that I used from Luna Cycles, and they use it as a mid-motor conversion for sort of like homebrew e-bike kind of stuff. And it's got issues. While I was test riding, I found out pretty quickly that the Sprague clutch itself slips, so it's probably, not really all that well rated. But again, since this is a prototype, not that concerned with it. But that's definitely going to come up if you try and do this style of bike on your own. Then it gets around to the whole, all right, what did I learn from all of this? And what I learned was, aside from just the overall back of the napkin fabrication thing, was that you don't need 7 speeds to make one of these bikes very efficient, and that's what that hub is. It's a Shimano 7-speed Nexus, and if you're gonna do it, just do it with a single speed, because this doesn't get you anything extra other than extra headaches. The other part is that, like I was saying, as soon as you turn a bike into anything other than a bicycle, it gets worse as a bike. It gets slightly better as a motorcycle, and way more dangerous and sketchy as a bike. So there's that. That's pretty much all I got. I got to keep rambling on here for another minute or so, but this here is just general fabrication stuff. I found that having a belt sander really speeds up the fit and finish on these pie cut turns and all that. Really enjoy having that around. I was hoping to get a bigger one, but this one came to me for free because a buddy of mine's dad was, expired. So anyhow, there's that, and now we're just gonna be finishing up cutting some gasket and stuff, which not necessary. Like, you can buy cover gaskets for these engines, but I like practicing this sort of stuff because there's more than a couple of times I've run into a situation where you need a gasket and you can't buy it, so you have to make one yourself, and just being in practice for that sort of stuff is handy. Anyways, all done with this sort of, ta-da, look, that's a gasket. All done with this sort of stuff, and open up some good parts and slap them on, and quick assembly, and Bob's your uncle. Check this out.